Hey y'all, I am back with some more dinner ideas, and we're gonna start off strong. I'm making some chicken birria tacos. Birria tacos is my number one favorite thing to get at our local Mexican restaurant, but I've never had a chicken version, so I've really been wanting to give this a try. So, in this bowl, I've got about 2 pounds of some boneless, skinless chicken thighs, and I just got those coated in a little bit of olive oil, sea salt, and black pepper. The next step is going to be to prep our chilies. So I can't really pronounce that first one. The second bag is some ancho chilies. Now, the original recipe called for 3 different types of chilies, but I already have these two on hand from the last time I made a birria ramen. I ordered these from Amazon, and I just decided to use what I already had instead of ordering some more. So I'm going to be using 8 of the first type of pepper and then 1 ancho chili. And all I did was remove the stems and shake out the seeds. So now these are prepped and ready to go. I am going to be cooking the chicken and the sauce in my Instant Pot. So I've got this turned on the saute mode, and I'm just going to toast these chilies up for about 5 minutes. So I did go in a couple of times and kind of toss it around a little bit, but this step was very simple to do. And now I'm going to start cooking off the chicken. Or not cooking, I should say sear. But anytime that I sear meat in my Instant Pot, I like to use some Pam cooking spray, or else everything sticks horribly. I forgot with that first piece of chicken, so that one did stick a little bit, but luckily I remembered for the rest. But yeah, I'm not looking to cook these all the way through just yet. I'm just searing these for about 2 to 3 minutes per side, just to give it a little bit of color, kind of lock in the juices, and just feel like it makes it taste a little bit better. But yeah, I did have to do that bowl of chicken in 2 batches. I did not want to overcrowd the bottom of that pot, and I was sure to get all those little bits of chicken off that first round because I didn't want it to like burn and then end up in the finished product. But here we go with that second round, same thing, just searing it on both sides. So now that all that chicken is seared, I got that removed to a separate plate, and then I added back in about a tablespoon of some olive oil. I tossed in about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, and I did go ahead and mince up about a handful of some fresh garlic. Let that cook for about a minute, and then I grabbed some bone broth, some chicken bone broth. I'm pretty sure this is the first time I have ever bought that before, and the Swanson one was the cheapest version out of all of them for me anyways, and I did add in 2 cups. I also added in a little seasoning blend. It was a teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of dried coriander, a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of some ground cloves. I also sprinkled in some onion powder because the actual recipe does call for, actual onion, so I wanted to get that flavor in there. And then I went ahead and dumped back in that seared chicken and those toasted chilies. Now, the recipe did specify to make sure that the chilies are like down in there in the liquid, so I should have put that in there first, but as always, I made it work. Got the chicken covering it, and then lastly, I threw in 4 bay leaves, and then I am just gonna let this cook for 8 minutes, and then I'm gonna let it naturally release anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. I ended up doing 6 minutes, and then I'm going to let out the pressure. So this was letting out a little bit of liquid, as you can see. So when that happens, I just kind of slightly toggle it back and forth until that stops. And then here we go. I'm just letting all that pressure out before opening that lid. That's very important. So the first thing I'm going to do once the chicken is done is remove those bay leaves. We don't need them anymore. Just going to toss those out. And then I'm just going to go in and grab my chicken and start adding that to a separate bowl so that I can shred it here in a little bit. And as you can see, like, it's just falling apart. This chicken, honestly, it came out so perfect. It was so tender and juicy. Couldn't ask for better cooked chicken. Not overcooked at all. And then next, I'm going to take the chilies out of that liquid, and I'm putting those directly into my food processor. You could also use a blender, just whichever one you think would do the best job. Even though I did my food processor, I did end up still having to strain it, which I'll talk about and show you here in a little bit. But you definitely want to add a few spoonfuls of that liquid that everything cooked in. That way it will blend better. So put that over to blend for a few minutes. And then I'm just simply adding that back into the pot and stirring that in to combine. And as you can see, it looks a little bit chunky. That's not what you want. As I was standing here shredding up this chicken, I just got to thinking that I should probably taste test that sauce. just because it wasn't looking right. So I'm glad that I did because it was full of the chili skin, which is not a good experience. You definitely don't want that. You want it to be smooth. You don't want any little bits of nothing in this sauce. So I did decide to run it through my fine mesh strainer, and it just takes a little bit of time to do. As you can see, I'm just kind of tapping it, using my spoon to push it through, and then you are left with the perfect sauce. Now, this whole meal definitely did take a lot of dishes, which I guess I don't mind every now and then, but just throwing that out there. I made a lot of dishes. But yeah, so I'm just taking that cooked and shredded chicken and pouring it back into that sauce. As you can see, it's super thick, which is not exactly what you want. So I did decide to add in a good splash more of that bone broth. And I'm just going to let that sit on warm with the lid on to keep that chicken warm while I make the side dish. So I'm going to be making some buttered corn rice to go along with these tacos. So I started by melting down a few tablespoons of butter. I added a good drizzle of olive oil into this skillet, a big spoonful of minced garlic, and I did do some onion powder. Sauteed that garlic for about a minute, and then I tossed in 1.5 cups of some white long grain rice. I did wash it really good first, and then I'm just going to let that toast in that garlic butter for a good 5 minutes. You want it to turn like a light golden brown color. Then I grabbed a can of corn and I drained it, and I didn't add in the whole thing. I did about 3/4 of the can. And then I added in 3 cups of hot water and a tablespoon of some chicken bouillon powder. So I'm just going to wait for this to come up to a boil. And once it does, I'm going to turn the heat down to low. I'm going to add my lid and I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. While that rice is cooking, I'm going to grab this cheese, which also I cannot pronounce. But yeah, I had to watch a video on how to pull this apart. That's what we're going to use for the tacos. And by this point, you're going to check your rice, make sure the broth is absorbed. And if it is, you're going to put that lid back on, turn off the heat, and let it sit for 5 minutes to rest. So now the 5 minutes has passed, so I'm going in and I'm just fluffing everything together and it is ready to eat. Y'all, this was so good. I know that it is so simple, but I was just wanting something different than like some traditional Mexican rice because I feel like I've been having that a lot lately. This was a great way to switch it up, and this would be the perfect side for so many different dishes. But now I'm going to start assembling these tacos. So I just got a large skillet out. I spritzed it with some olive oil. And now I'm just taking some corn tortillas and just dipping them into that sauce. It was still on the thick side, but I just made do with what I could. And then I'm just going to cook 3 at a time. And I'm just taking some of that cheese that I pulled apart and layering that over half of the tortilla. That cheese is really tasty, by the way. I'm pretty sure that's the first time I've bought it like that, and I will most definitely repurchase it. It did say in that recipe to use this specific cheese, that it's the best for birria tacos, and I completely agree. It melts so good and has such a good flavor. But as you can see, I'm just taking some of that saucy chicken and layering it over the cheese, and then I'm just going to do a little bit more of that cheese right over top of the chicken. So now I'm just going to get those flipped over. The first batch for me is always a little bit wonky, but after you get the hang of it, it starts going pretty quickly. And I quickly realized that it's easiest to take the heavy side, like the filled side, and flip it over that way. And yeah, I'm just going to let that toast up for a couple of minutes on each side to give it a little bit of a crisp. So here's my plate. Sadly, I did not have any fresh cilantro. I tried the freezer hack that everyone's been telling me about, and I thawed it out, and it was so soggy I could not use it. And also, that broth that I'm going to dip the tacos in is actually from my local Mexican restaurant. Ironically, we went to Mexican the night before this with some friends. It was kind of unplanned, and of course, I got the birria tacos, so I had a container in the fridge left over, so that's what I used to dip those in. But I also have some lime wedges on the side, and of course that rice, and this whole meal was seriously phenomenal. I was so proud to serve this, and yeah, I highly recommend it. If you like birria tacos, you definitely should try out this chicken version, if you eat chicken, obviously. Up next is going to be a really quick dinner to throw together. I feel like it's important to have those quick dinners in the back of your head that your whole family likes, just for those like busy nights. But I have been seeing all over the internet Mexican hot dogs, and everyone's making them look so good. I found this pack of chorizo sausages at my local Save-A-Lot. I have never seen these before, and after seeing those videos, I was like, that's how I want to use them. Now, in these videos, everyone's using like beef hot dogs that are wrapped in bacon, which I'm totally going to try, but I just thought this would be a fun little switch up to that. So I'm just cooking those in some bacon grease in my electric skillet. I'll also throw in some fresh jalapenos that I just quickly de-seeded and sliced up. In these videos, people are using the jalapenos and some onions and tomatoes, so if that's your thing, definitely do that. But as you can see, I just browned both sides of the sausages, and then I'm going to add a lid, turn this down to low, that way the insides can fully cook. Now, to go along with this, I'm going to be making a quick Greek yogurt mac and cheese. I used to make this recipe years ago, and I really wanted to bring it back. So I bought this snowflake pasta over the winter, and I just never got around to using it. So I just figured we could do that. So you need 2 cups of pasta. I just added that to some salted boiling water, and I'm going to cook that until al dente and go and drain it. And then in a separate pot, I'm going to add a half a cup of milk, 2 cups of some shredded sharp cheddar cheese. I did shred it myself, even though you don't have to, and a pinch of salt. Now, the reason I use a separate pot is because I remember the last time I made this, even though it's been several years, that, I use the same pot that I cooked the pasta in after I drained it, and my sauce was completely ruined. Like, it curdled instantly, I think because it was so hot. So I wasn't going to risk that again. But as soon as that cheese is melted into the sauce, I turn my heat down to low, and I'm adding in a half a cup of some plain Greek yogurt. I have been on a Greek yogurt kick lately. I bought that big old tub at Costco, so I've just been trying to find different ways to use it. So I feel good that it's adding some protein to this mac and cheese, like for my kids. But yeah, as soon as that sauce was heated through, I turned off the heat. I added back in that drained pasta, and I'm just simply tossing it all together. And of course, I'm going to finish it off with a little bit of black pepper. Now, we love this mac and cheese. It's definitely different than any other mac and cheese that we've tasted, but I can see that it wouldn't be for everyone. It's definitely got a pretty strong twang to it from that Greek yogurt. But we personally love that. Plus the sharpness from that cheese. It's just a match made in heaven, in my opinion. But now that that's done, the last thing I have to do is butter and toast up the hot dog buns. So you just take some butter, which I'm just using, I think I have Blue Bonnet right now, just because it spreads so easily. But you do that on top and bottom and just cook it for a few minutes on a medium heat. And it is such a great little idea there. I've never really done it like that, but it like steams the inside without making it like fall apart. So I'm going to remember that and do that from now on, even with like regular hot dogs. We just topped these with some shredded cheese. I ended up sprinkling some pepper over that. Don't really know why, but it just kind of sounded good in the moment. And then of course I got a good scoop of that mac and cheese, and again, this was really fast to throw together, which I love. Everything had good strong flavors to it, and it was just a fun little dinner, honestly. I went back and forth on how I like this chorizo sausage. Like, some bites I were like, wow, this is so good, and then some bites kind of tasted like raw oniony to me, and if you know me, you know I hate that. I don't know, I was the only one that thought that, but yeah, it was a fun dinner. Up next, I'm going to be making some pulled bologna sandwiches out on the Blackstone, and I really wanted to make my homemade coleslaw to top those sandwiches with. Me and my husband love coleslaw, and this is my go-to recipe. It's so simple. So I have about half of a small head of cabbage here. I did have to quarter it up so that I could run it through this grater. I always hand shred my cabbage for my coleslaw. We like it 100 times better versus like the bagged shredded coleslaw mix. The consistency of this is what makes it stand out and makes it so good, I promise you. I also like to take a couple carrots. I did peel and wash those first, and then I'm just simply running it through the shredder the same way. I really do love this shredder, but where I'm left-handed, it's a little bit awkward because I have to rotate it backwards, so it takes me a little bit to get used to that, but still love it. And then now I'm going to whip out some mayo. I got some Hellmann's here. I always like to do roughly around a cup, I would say. And I like to do a good splash of vinegar, just your regular white distilled vinegar. And then I like to do a little bit of sugar. Typically, I do around 2 to 3 like spoonfuls of it, but I just decided to pour it this time. And of course, a big clump came out, but I just took it out, added it back in there because it didn't touch anything else. And then lastly, I'm just gonna season it to taste with some salt and black pepper. That is it, ingredient wise. I'm just gonna get everything, fold it together, and I say it every time, but as you're starting this, it's gonna look a little bit on the dry side. And in the past, when I was a lot younger, I would add like a lot more mayo, and then it ended up just being too much because I promise you, as this sits in the fridge, like some sort of magic happens and the dressing just kind of thins out and it just coats everything perfectly. Like, it's enough. But yeah, this is one of those dishes that definitely tastes better with time. It's always best if you can do it the night before, but I rarely can do that myself. I ended up doing it a couple hours before, but definitely get that in the fridge as early as you can. So now it's time to get started on this pulled bologna. I saw this idea on TikTok roughly about a year ago, and I just thought it was the most interesting thing ever. I will definitely link that video down below in my description box if y'all want to go and watch that. But we are a big like fried bologna loving family. We also love a good like barbecue sandwich. So I really don't see how you could go wrong here. So this is the first time I've ever bought this type of bologna. It was a good price. I don't remember it exactly. I wish I did. But yeah, I just got all of that packaging removed and I got that cut in 2/4 because again, I'm going to run it through that same grater, which of course I did give everything a really good rinse because I didn't want like bits of cabbage up in the bologna. But yeah, this felt like such an odd thing to do, to shred the bologna like this, but again, I just thought it was such a cool idea, and it's kind of satisfying to grate it. Honestly, I'm just letting it fall into a big aluminum pan. That's going to make it easier to transport outside, and this is also what I'm going to serve it out of because, you know, I'm sure some people watching have never ate bologna. Maybe it's not so popular where you're from, but it's fully cooked, so it's not like it's raw meat or anything like that. So it's perfectly fine to put the finished product back in the pan, you know. But yeah, obviously this is a lot. Definitely more than what a family of 4 would use. I feel like this is a great idea for like a cookout with friends or family. But I also wanted to tell y'all what I did with some of the leftovers. This is going to have some barbecue sauce on it, so I was a little bit worried about this idea. But I ended up making a bologna gravy to go over biscuits for breakfast like a few days later, and it was really good. So I would do it again. So I grabbed this grind-staffed all-purpose rub. Kind of wanted to show y'all the ingredients because I just thought all of that would pair really good with it. And I just did a good layer over the top and then went in and just tossed it around. I definitely didn't want to be like heavy-handed with the seasoning because I was worried about like over-salting it. Because if you're familiar with bologna, it's already like pretty salty. So I just did like a decent amount, nothing too crazy. And then I went out to my Blackstone. I'm just oiling it up with some vegetable oil. I've got this on about a medium heat, and I'm just taking the bottom of my spatula and spreading out that oil. This day it was super windy outside, so my tripod was kind of moving it around. I eventually got my husband out there to hold it while I was trying to show y'all how I did this, but this cooks up really quick. I mean, it's basically just like you're frying up some fried bologna. I'm just taking both of my spatulas. I try to spread it out into an even thin layer. That way I could get a lot of that surface area covered, you know, trying to crisp it up some, just like you would with fried bologna. When it was about halfway cooked through, I grabbed some barbecue sauce. This Kinder's barbecue sauce has been my favorite lately, so I'm just doing a good drizzle of that. I definitely didn't do like too much or anything because of my kids. But yeah, I'm just simply tossing it around. I would say this took me around like 10 minutes, you know. Obviously, just cook it to your liking. I wanted to do a little close-up there to really go in and show you what it looks like. And then I got my husband there holding the pan so that I could put this all back in there because it took off flying right before that clip. But while I was cooking that on the Blackstone, I was cooking up this bag of zesty curly fries in the oven. This is my first time purchasing these. I usually just get the Arby's ones when we want curly fries, but these were a little bit cheaper, so I wanted to see how we liked them, and they were super good. Definitely going to rebuy those. But here's the little setup. I've got the pan of pulled bologna, got the coleslaw out, got the buns out, and some mayo. So good little setup there. And then here is my plate, how everything looks put together. I do wish that I took the extra time to butter and toast the buns, but I did get a little bit lazy towards the end. But this whole meal was seriously so good, just like I thought it would be. Like I said earlier, like really, how can you go wrong with these ingredients? But I just thought this was the funnest and coolest idea, and I would definitely recommend it. I would definitely make it again. It was cheap, easy, and quick. This night, I am stepping out of my comfort zone. If you have watched me for a while, you know I pretty much never make seafood. I've always been weird about it. I do love like a battered and deep fried codfish, which I have made before on my channel, and it is such an amazing recipe. But this is my first time making it this way. So Kroger had a really good sale on their cod, so I couldn't pass it up, and I figured it's time to try out something new. So I simply just thawed these out. I rinsed them off and I just patted them dry the best that I could. And here I'm just coating them in lemon juice and salt and pepper. So now I'm just going to work on the breading for it. Now, I just followed a TikTok video on this. It didn't have, measurements or anything, so I just kind of winged it. But I did some all-purpose flour, about a tablespoon of some cornstarch, and then I just seasoned this flour up with salt, pepper, onion and garlic powder, and paprika. The next thing that I'm going to do is take a couple tablespoons of butter, and I'm just going to let that melt down into my largest skillet. I have it on about a medium-high heat, and once it was nice and hot, I'm just battering my fish one by one right over top of the skillet. And, if you've never worked with fish before, like this was pretty delicate, so that first one basically like broke apart right down the middle before I could even start cooking it. But yeah, I just did my best to make sure that the sides weren't touching, so that I wasn't overcrowding the skillet, so that it would cook properly and everything. And I let it cook for a few minutes on each side. I absolutely love the color that these got, and I was a little nervous since I've never like cooked fish on top of the stove like this. So I just did a quick Google search to see what temp it needed to be at, and it said 145 is when it would be safe. So I just use a meat thermometer to make me feel better. And yeah, I just got that removed to a plate once it was fully cooked through. And again, I love the way that that looked. So to that same skillet, I'm going to melt down some butter. I got a little bit too much, so I took that out, and I'm going to use that in the mashed potatoes that I'm making. But I also chopped up a bunch of fresh garlic and threw that in. I don't know what happened to that clip. Maybe I forgot to hit record. I don't know. But I cooked that garlic down for a couple of minutes. And then I added in a good amount of dried parsley. You could absolutely use fresh if that's what you prefer or what you have. But after about 30 seconds or so, I turned off the heat and squeezed in some fresh lemon juice. And that is it for this lemony garlic butter sauce. I just poured that evenly over top of the fish, and I think that that is just a beautiful plate. This is another dish that I was extremely proud of. Now, to go along with it, I'm going to make some restaurant-style garlic mashed potatoes. This isn't how I normally make my like regular mashed potatoes, but when I feel like switching it up, this is what I like to do. Now, I didn't really want to grab these baby potatoes, but it's all I could get my hands on at my local grocery store. I wanted some red skin potatoes, but they were out. But I just cooked those until they were fork tender in some salted water, and then I drained them off, added them to this bowl with about a half a cup of some sour cream, a half a cup of this grated Parmesan cheese. I bought that in the refrigerated section, and then I'm just seasoning it with some sea salt and some black pepper, a good pinch of garlic powder. I added in some more butter, and I did a splash of half and half. I always like to use either heavy cream or half and half in my mashed potatoes. I just feel like it makes it richer and creamier. But if you don't have that or don't want to use it, milk is just fine. And since these were like baby potatoes, it made it a little bit harder for the electric mixer. But once it started going pretty good, as you can see. I absolutely love when the skins are in the mashed potatoes. It's just such an easy way to jazz up some mashed potatoes, and they paired perfectly with this fish. I also steamed up some broccoli, and then we've got that leftover coleslaw from the pulled bologna sandwiches, and then I did make a box of the Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits. This whole meal turned out amazing. I truly thought that I was going to be standing in the kitchen for hours preparing all this, but it truly came together pretty quick. And, I was a little skeptical to try this fish, which I know that sounds silly, but that's just how I am. But it really was good. It was a really great turnout. Okay, lastly, I'm going to be making some steak nachos. Now, while I was thinking about what kind of cheese sauce that I wanted to pour over the nachos, I thought of something kind of random. It's a recipe that I used to make many years ago. It's a Chili's copycat queso recipe, and I really wasn't too sure like how those flavors would go with the steak nachos, but I figured why not give it a try? I mean, that's what's so fun about cooking at home. You can do whatever you want. So in my small crock pot, I did 16 ounces of cubed Velveeta, a cup of milk, the juice of 1 lime, 2 teaspoons of cumin, 2 teaspoons of paprika, and a tablespoon of chili powder, and then 1 can of no bean chili. Now, typically I would do Hormel, but again, that wasn't available, so I used the store brand, and it was just as good, I have to say. So I just gave that a quick stir, added the lid, and I'm going to let that cook on high for 1 hour. So once that got closer to being done, I went ahead and started on some homemade tortilla chips. Now, these are the same tortillas that I use for the chicken birria tacos. I did not want them to go to waste, so I figured we'll take these nachos up a level and make these real quick. So I just heated up some vegetable oil in my Dutch oven. I let that get to about 375, and then I just simply started dropping these chips in. You don't want to overcrowd this as well, obviously, so I just did about a handful at a time, and these cook up very quickly. I do make sure to flip each one over individually, and once they get closer to the color that I'm looking for, take them out of that oil with a slotted spoon. Try to get all that oil out. And I place those over a wire rack on a cookie sheet, and as soon as they come out, I hit them with some sea salt. And I'm going to continue that in batches. So this is the steak that I'm going to be using. This is a huge shortcut for me. This is my first time ever buying this. I got it at Costco. I've seen so many people talk about it, and I totally get the hype now. Now, this does seem a little pricey at $26.19, but this is for a little over 2 pounds of the steak. It does come into 2 individual packages, and I only needed one of the packages to feed us 4, so that price is going to be for 2 dinners. And this was really great quality. Like, it's seasoned so good. It comes out so tender and juicy. And, it's a little bit awkward to pull these slices apart, but it's nothing too crazy. But yeah, and just for the convenience, I can totally see why so many people love it. And as you can see, it's like at a, what would you call that? Maybe like a medium rare. So it takes very little time to heat this up, like maybe a minute per side, and that is it. So I finally got those tweezer tongs that I have been talking about, that I have been wanting. Finally went and bought those off of Amazon, and I'm so glad that I did. It does exactly what I thought it would. It's really precise. It just makes flipping stuff over so much quicker in, a situation like this. But yeah, once that was heated through, took it to a cutting board and chopped it into smaller pieces. And by that time, the cheese sauce was done. So there's the consistency of that. And now I'm going to assemble my nachos. So I started with a layer of those homemade chips, and then I'm just doing a good layer of that chopped up steak. Then I'm going to do a few good drizzles of that Chili's queso. And then probably not necessary, but I did decide to do a little bit of shredded sharp cheddar as well. And then I made a homemade guacamole. We've got the sour cream, and then I also made some refried beans, and then I just topped it with some pickled jalapenos. And this came out super delicious. That Chili's queso went with it so well, surprisingly. We just love this. But that's all I got for y'all in today's video. I hope that I was able to give you some different ideas. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see y'all in my next one.